In this video, we're going to talk all about the sum and the difference of cubes. All right, now right behind me, I have that the sum of cubes is written in the form a to the third plus b to the third, and the difference meaning the subtraction sign, would be a to the third minus b to the third. Now, as a and b isn't always just going to be a's and b's or any other letter. It could be the product of something that is being cubed. For example, later we'll do one that maybe looks something like the form of x to the third minus 8. All right, we'll get to that one in a little bit, where the x is going to be what your a would be like here, right? X to the third, a to the third. But 8, well, what is being cubed there? Well, what times what times what? What times itself 3 times equals 8? Well, 2 does. 2 times 2 is 4, times another 2, a third 2, is going to be your 8, okay? Now, what are those two formulas before we get too far? The sum of cubes is going to be a plus b in parentheses times, and then it's going to be a squared, all right? And then minus a times b plus b squared. Whereas the difference of cubes is going to be the formula a minus b. And then over here, we're going to have a squared plus ab plus b squared. And you'll notice a couple things with these. One, they're very, very similar. But two, what are some of the differences? How do I know if I get pluses or minuses and when and where? Well, the way I like to remember it is that the sum gets a plus in the first two, whereas the difference gets a minus. All right, and then after that, you can just remember that there's going to have 2 plus signs in each. So this one already has one. And then it goes plus, minus, plus, another plus at the end right here. And this one, if it starts with a negative and it has to have 2 pluses, then this one also needs the 2 pluses. So the b squared at the end is always going to be added. So really the only difference then is going to be these two signs. You have to remember kind of which one goes where. All right. So let's get back to this. Let's say I wanted to take and factor out, so find this difference, because there's a minus sign, of x to the third minus 8. Well, I can think that a, in this case, is going to be my x, and b, like I said earlier, well, what times what times what, or what times itself 3 times, is going to be 8, and that is 2. So if I kind of replace my a's and b's in my formula up here, I can kind of get what that's supposed to be. For example, all right, we have a to the third minus b to the third. If that's this one, then my a is x, my b is 2. So I'd say this is going to be x minus 2. And then over here, x squared instead of a squared, a times b. Well, my a is x, my b is 2. So I'm going to say plus 2x. And then my b squared at the end, that's going to be 2 times 2, which is 4. Okay, so we have something like this, and that's going to be a difference of cubes. Let's try a few more, and then at the end, we're going to actually solve by factor. All right, so I have a couple written out for us here. We have a sum of cubes and a difference of cubes. Let's start with the sum first. And if I look at kind of each of these terms, sort of my a and my b, the a in this one, well, what times itself 3 times is going to be 64? 4 is, all right? 4 times 4 times 4 gives us 64, so I can say that my a here is 4, and the b, what times what times what, is 125? 5, all right? So my b is 5. Now, one other thing, this has an x to the third with it, and so because this is 4 to the third is just 64, 4x, you could say, is that a to the third power like I was having up here. All right, so if that's all true, then I can replace my a and my b with 4x plus 5. All right, and then I need a squared. So 4x times 4x, or 4x squared, is going to be 16x squared. All right, a times b, so I need a minus first off. Then a times b is going to be 20x. And then lastly, the b squared is going to be 25 plus 25, like this. So if your problem was just asking you to factor or to come up with what the sum of cubes is, you could get this answer, all right? The second one, the difference of cubes, same idea here. What is my a? Well, what times itself 3 times gives me 216, and that's going to be 6. So a is going to be 6, and again, I have an x to the third, so I'll say 6x, whereas the b, what times itself 3 times is 27? That's 3. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. So 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. Therefore, this is going to be a 3 for the B. All right, now I'm going to be following the template for this bottom one. I do A minus B, so 6x minus 3. Okay, and then for the second one over here, a squared, that is 36x. All right, and then AB, that's going to be 18x, and that gets a plus this time. And lastly, B squared is going to be 9. Now, normally, these cannot factor any further. However, the second one I wanted to show you because it actually can, because I chose an A and a B that are actually factors of each other, right? I can take a common factor out of both of them. I could take a 3 out. And in both of these, you'll notice that I could also take a 3 out. I could take a 3 out of both 6 and 3, as well as all three of 36, 18, and 9. So most of the time, like this one with the 4x and the 5, this is as factors as it's going to be. Okay, so if you do start with something that is maybe that has a GCF, you can take that out first and then go ahead and do it from there. All right, let's try some where actually solve by factoring. All right, we're gonna start with a sum of cubes one, and you'll notice when it says to solve by factoring, a lot of times it'll equal 0. We'll have to make it equal 0 by moving things across on your equal sign here, okay? And if I look at this one, this is definitely a sum of cubes. 125 is 5 cubed, x cubed is x cubed, and 8 is 2 cubed. And so if I think of my A, in this case being 5x, and the B as being 2, like we discussed earlier, I think I can use that to help me out. All right, so if I just write kind of what this would be in the formula, it's going to be that equals 0 at the end. So we'll have our A, 5x, plus the B, okay? And then I need A squared, which is going to be 25x squared, and then minus the A times B, in this case that's 10x, and then lastly, plus the B squared, which is plus 2 squared is 4. Okay, and now again, like I said, this equals 0. So if the question's asking us to factor this completely, I need to set both this equal to 0 and this equal to 0, and then solve. So 5x plus 2, excuse me, 5x plus 2 equals 0. I'm going to subtract 2 on both sides. That's going to give me 5x equals negative 2, divide by 5, I get x equals negative 2/5. That's the easy one. The harder one is the other one here because, first off, as long as there's no GCF between both those, 5x and 2, which there's not, this will never factor, which means in order to solve it, we have to use the quadratic formula. And it's not going to look too nice, okay? So now I'm going to put up a new A, B, and C. If you remember your quadratic equation, that's negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C, all divided by 2A. If you don't remember that, I do have other videos on the quadratic formula. You can check those out. But in our case, my B is negative 10. So the opposite of my B would be positive 10. Excuse me. All right, and then B squared is going to be 100. So square root of 100 minus 4. Let's see, 4A is 25. And C is 4. All divided by 2 times A. 2 times 25 is 50. All right, if we do a little math here, the part underneath the square root is called a discriminant. If I do that, first off, 4 times 25 is 100. 100 times 4 gives us 400. So 100 minus 400 is negative 300. So I'm going to have 10 plus or minus the square root of negative 300 over 50. Also, don't quote me on this, but I've done a lot of these today, especially, and almost all of them give us a negative inside the square root. So I wonder if there's something to that. I haven't proved it yet though, so maybe that's just a side thought. All right, what can I take out? What's my biggest square number? Probably it's going to be a 100, sorry, to give us 10. And when I do that, that's going to be 10 plus or minus, I'll kind of show you what I mean here. The negative, I can take an I out, and then 300, if I divide that up, I'm going to get the square root of 100 times the square root of 3. So when I say 10, what I mean is the square root of 100 is 10. So I'm going to have 10 plus or minus, instead of I 10, I like to put the 10 first and say 10I, and then the root 3. That's going to be over 50. Now, what can I simplify here? Well, the 10, and the 50 are all outside of my square root. And so the zeros on each of those are going to cancel. And that's going to give me 1 plus or minus I root 3 1 plus or minus I root 3. Then those 0 and the 50 also cancel to give us 5. Now, one thing to note here before I do our last one, this is two different solutions because of the plus or minus. Remember, this is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So down here, this is two answers. I could take 1 plus I root 3 over 5 and 1 minus I root 3 over 5 to give me two answers. I have my other answer of negative 2/5 right there. And that's important because this is a cubic function, meaning if it's degree 3, I should have 3 solutions, and I do. 1, 2, 3. All right, let's try a difference of cubes. All right, last one for today is going to be a difference of cubes problem where it's set equal to 0, and so we have to solve this. And if you think about our a, and this one, that's going to be just x, and our b, what times itself 3 times gives us 64? 4. We talked about that earlier in this video, okay? So if I kind of write out that formula from earlier, it should be x minus 4. And then I need two pluses, so these are both going to be plus over here. And the first one's going to be a squared, so that's x squared. And then a times b, x times 4 is 4x. And lastly, b squared, 4 times 4 is 16. So I should have x minus 4 times x squared plus 4x plus 16. Again, this first one, oops, you know what, I forgot to say it's equal to 0. This first one, I have to set it equal to 0. Should be a nice easy one to solve here. X minus 4 equals 0. I'm going to add 4 to both sides and of course get 4. The other one though, again, will not factor because those two are not like terms, and even if it did, once I took that GCF out, I would have to use the quadratic formula anyway. So let's do that. Let's call this my A, B, and C, where if I do negative b, or the opposite of my b, I'm going to have negative 4 plus or minus the square root of b squared, 16, minus 4 times a times c. You just use the coefficient here, so my coefficient is like a 1, right? So a is 1 and c is 16, like this. And that's all divided by 2 times a, 2 times 1 is 2. Doing a little bit of mental math here. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 16, let's see, 40 and 24 is 64. I knew that. 16 minus 64, 48. So yeah, we're going to have negative 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 48, all divided by 2. Okay? Now, this negative 48, again, I have to take an I out. Take a negative, or when you take your negative out, you take an I. So it's going to be negative 4 plus or minus, and I'm going to say I. And then 48, I think I can take out a 16. And this is going to be 16 times 3. So that is going to be the square root of 16 times square root of 3, all divided by 2. Square root of 16 is 4. So this is negative 4 plus or minus 4i root 3, all divided by 2. Okay, looks like negative 4, 4, and 2 are all divisible by 2. So my final answer is going to be negative 2 plus or minus 2i root 3. All right, and that 2 on the bottom would cancel because it's divisible by 2. So again, this is two answers with the plus and the minus. This is another answer. Oops, that's another answer with the 4, and that's good because it was a degree of 3, so we should have 3 answers. All right, hopefully this helped you out. And until next time, keep doing your math homework fast and accurately.